have corn for sale and on sale. Hello, this is Justin McKinney with Comstock Investments. On this Thursday, again, phenomenal export sales for the 25-26 crop year. 24-25 was a little low, came in at 6.7 million bushels. Nothing really to write home about there. Overall, that puts us at a 2.78 billion bushel export program, 27% up year over year. We have to be positive on those numbers. The census numbers continue to be adjusted that we need to move exports probably another 100 million bushels higher. The data would support that to do that, but will the USDA go ahead and do that on the August 12th report? It feels likely. These numbers, we haven't seen cancellations. We continue to see new crop sales on the books, and that is the drive home point here today. New crop sales came in at 112.4 million bushels. Total commitments, 464 million bushels. That is a 102% increase year over year versus last year's 230 million bushel commitments. We have corn for sale and on sale. We continue to hear about these places such as Brazil. Brazil has had an excellent crop. They are going to have the exportable surplus to export that corn. So far, those sales are coming to the United States. Looking at March to July, Brazil actually exported 3.8 million metric tons versus last year's 5.3. So Brazil exports down a little bit. Will they pick those up as the crop continues to move towards the port? Most likely, I would guess a lot of that port capacity is being used by soybeans. However, for the United States corn farmer, the exports look great. We did put a bottom in the market, at least temporarily. We did trade under $4 yesterday. Today we've been up above that, bumping on resistance right now as we record this. We'll see how the close ends up. But all things considered, we look towards 25, 26. Where will that final export number be? I think it's to be determined, but so far it looks very, very good. And depending on where USDA comes in at yield, low prices obviously cure low prices. So if we come in with something in the 185, as the private trade estimates have been forecasting 185 to 188, some higher than that. We have the vegetative index very high for this time of year. We have the crop condition scores very high for this time of year. Nobody is thinking this crop is probably under a 181, which was previously what the USDA has put out. So where we trade, we'll find out where the estimates are. We'll find out moving forward. But August 12th is knocking on the door. What USDA does with exports will be important. Moving over to the soybeans, strong old crop sales. Again, we continue to hear about these South American bushels. They had a huge crop down there, yet we sold 17.2 million bushels this week. Total commitments came in at 1.89, 13% higher year over year. However, shipment pace, the balance of the year, we're running very, very short on weeks to get those moved out. Potentially, we will reach the USDA. Maybe some of those sales get rolled into 25, 26, which is not what the soybean market really needs. We need additional demand to come forward. We're still lacking the Chinese trade deal. We're lacking, those new crop buyers to come in. However, that was a big export sale this morning on the old crop. New crop soybean sales came in at 20 million bushels this week. That year over year comparison, where total new crop commitments are at about 132 million bushels right now, that's down 34 million bushels versus last year's very, very poor pace at 166. It's the lowest in 20 years for July. China's still absent. Again, what ends up happening with those trade deals? Unfortunately, I personally believe that we do not see much happen between now and the end of October or the first part of November. And then it remains how quickly we can get that export program up and going. Will we see a spike from the rest of the world to step in ahead of China and get some beans on the books? It is very likely that happened. That happened in 2018, but ultimately replacing 100% of the Chinese demand that we could potentially lose is going to be a tall order. that continues to hang over the soybean market. We'll see if we continue to pick up these sales as new crop harvest gets closer in the Delta. I know I've said it before, but we need to find a home for those soybeans. Flipping gears to the wheat market, we did sell 27.1 million bushels of wheat this week. That gives us a total commitments of 378 million bushels, up 21% year over year. Total for the year, the USDA is projecting 850 million bushels. That would be a 3% gain year over year. So need to average about 22.6 million bushels a week. Moving forward, where does that put us? We have that report coming out. The trade estimates have not been published just yet, but we should get them sometime this afternoon or tomorrow morning. USDA August 12th trade estimates will be in the Comstock report. So take a look and see. You can keep score at home just as a rough idea as the numbers come out. So far, the likely changes coming up on Tuesday's report. Corn exports, USDA currently at 2.5, as we said earlier. Highly likely they bump that 50, should probably be 100 million. You add the shipments, the sales, the census export data. It's pretty obvious that we need to move that higher. Ethanol, probably again a cut from about 50 million bushels, but we'll see how they massage those numbers. Likely, I would expect exports up 100, ethanol down 50, somewhere in the net of about 50. 25, 26 corn, the bias is neutral to modestly higher. Huge new crop sales, the best since 2020. Unfortunately, we still remember that COVID year of 2020. The market went down, traded sub $3. We found world buyers. We stepped up. We bought that corn and we shipped it out. It did start our bull market. Part of that goes back to that 2019 crop that ended up being such a dud, but not acknowledged until the August of 2020 report. So we kind of have to peel the onion back a little bit when we make comparisons on that. However, again, still the best since 2020. We'll see where it shakes out. On the 2024, 2025 soybean exports, we likely see no changes. The target is achievable, but not expected to exceed that. So probably unchanged on that. The 25-26 soybean export, which is the number that a lot of people are watching. Again, without the Chinese demand coming into the market, will we be able to replace those bushels? The USDA currently is at a 1.745 billion bushel program. It's possible that they revise that lower. I would guess that they most likely kick that can down the road. Weak sales to start the year, as we just talked about, China absent, but we're just getting started in the 25-26 year. It would be hard to reduce that significantly from that number right now. If they were to reduce that, I would assume that any flash sales would continue to drive the market higher as we move forward. So as we move to the wheat export numbers, obviously the calendar year is different on the wheat. USDA at 850 million bushel forecast, likely modest increase is possible. The pace is very strong, but overall, worldwide, it doesn't feel like the U.S. is going to end up getting a significant portion of additional sales. An extra 50 or 100 million bushels. We could surely use that in the wheat market. If we could bottom the wheat market, we could possibly turn that corn market around, but that remains to be seen. One also interesting point today I found in the export report was the hog export number. We came in at 31,000 metric ton. Yes, down 22% versus last week, up 27% on the 4-week average. However, China was the biggest buyer of that. It will be interesting to see if we can string together a couple weeks of increased sales to China. We continue to hear about their hog numbers. We'll see if there's any storyline there developing, but it is a good sign for those hog producers out there who have battled some lower prices the last couple of years. We're finally getting profitable, but it kind of depends on what we end up doing with the herd size here. This has been Justin McKinney with the Comstock Report.
Futures trading involves risk. The risk of loss in trading futures and/or options is substantial, and each investor and/or trader must consider whether this is a suitable investment. Past performance is not indicative of future results.